My name is Victor, and if you are also over 50 or perhaps already past 60, I want to begin with something that very few people in this space have the courage to say plainly. There is a quiet panic spreading among people our age, not the loud, dramatic kind that shows up on the news, a quieter one, the kind that arrives in the middle of the night when the room is still and the numbers start doing their own mathematics in your head. The kind that comes when you look at the retirement account statement and realize that the life you worked toward for decades is not as financially secure as you believed it would be. If that is where you are standing right now, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not alone, not even close, and it is not too late. But what I am going to share with you today requires that you listen with complete honesty, because the strategies that will actually move the needle require first accepting the reality of where you stand. Most of us who are now in our 50s and 60s did not arrive at this moment through laziness. That is the first thing I want to dismantle, because it is the story that keeps people stuck. The early decades of a career are spent surviving. You were building something from nothing. You were navigating the costs of building a life, housing, family, education, unexpected setbacks. Time moved fast. The compounding growth that every financial chart promises looked abstract and distant when the rent was due and the paycheck was already committed. There is no shame in that reality. But understanding it clearly is what allows you to stop being a passenger and become a driver again, even now, even at this stage. Because the question is not how you got here. The only question with any value is what you do from this point forward. Before I go any further, I need to stop and tell you something important. If what I am saying is resonating with you, if you recognize yourself in this situation, and you are serious about changing it, there is a complete resource I have put together specifically for people like us. You will find it in the first link in the description below this video. It covers, in full detail, exactly how to build and protect real wealth, even when you are past 60. Even when you feel like you are starting from near zero. The people who have gone through it are not financial experts. They are people exactly like you, who looked at their situation honestly and decided that the next chapter would be different. Take 30 seconds right now, open that link, and bookmark it. Then come back, because what I am about to share next is where the real work begins. Let me start with something that sounds simple, but most people genuinely skip. Take full inventory of your situation. Not a vague, approximate sense of where things stand. A precise, honest accounting. If you are 57 and in reasonable health, you may have 15 years or more before you reach 72. That is not a small number. 15 years of focused, intelligent financial behavior can produce an outcome that would surprise you. But the timeline only works in your favor when you treat it with respect. The greatest financial asset you possess right now is not your savings account, your home equity, or your investment portfolio. It is your capacity to earn an income. As long as you have that capacity, you have leverage. The problem is that most people underestimate how powerful that leverage is, and they spend it without intention. Your ability to earn is the engine. What happens to that income determines everything else. I have observed across many years a pattern that holds regardless of income level. It is this: as income rises, expenses rise in direct proportion and sometimes exceed it. There is a principle in financial history, expressed by the writer George Clason, that captures this precisely. He wrote that what each of us calls our necessary expenses will always rise to equal our income, unless we resist that tendency deliberately. That line should be uncomfortable for most of us, because when we examine our own financial histories honestly, we can see it at work. The person earning $50,000 per year and the person earning $200,000 per year often arrive at the same destination: very little saved. This is not about discipline in the moral sense, it is about awareness and design. You cannot manage what you refuse to measure. Which brings me to the foundation of any financial recovery at this stage of life. You must know your numbers with precision, not approximately, not a rough estimate. You need to know exactly what comes in every month and exactly where every dollar goes. The word budget has accumulated negative associations over the years. People hear it and think of restriction, of deprivation, of a kind of financial punishment. I want to reframe it entirely. A budget is not a wall, it is a map, and a map does not restrict your movement. It shows you where you are, where you want to go, and the most direct path between those 2 points. Without the map, you wander. With it, you move with intention. The budget is not the enemy of a good life. The absence of one is. One of the most revealing exercises you can do right now, and I mean starting today, is to commit to tracking every single expenditure for 30 consecutive days. Every transaction. Not weekly, not monthly in retrospect. Every single one in real time as it happens. What this does is expose the gap between what you believe you spend and what you actually spend. In my experience, that gap is almost always significant and often shocking. People consistently underestimate their discretionary spending by 30, 40, sometimes 50%. Subscriptions they forgot about. Small purchases that accumulate invisibly. Convenience spending that feels insignificant in the moment, but represents hundreds of dollars each month when added together. The 30-day audit does not require a financial degree. It requires honesty and a willingness to be uncomfortable. The discomfort lasts 30 days. The clarity it produces can reshape the next 15 years. Once you have that clarity, the natural next step becomes visible. Keep more of what you earn. This sounds so obvious that people dismiss it, and that dismissal is one of the most expensive mistakes they make. Consider this exercise. If you were somehow required to live on 70% of your current income, could you do it? Most people, when forced to answer honestly, acknowledge that yes, with some adjustments they could, but they do not make those adjustments voluntarily because nothing forces the conversation. The 30-day audit forces it. It shows you exactly where the unnecessary spending lives, and it gives you the power to redirect that money toward something that compounds over time, rather than disappearing into expenses that leave no trace. Now here is where I want to speak directly about creativity, because this is the area where people over 60 who find themselves behind have the most underutilized resources. The conventional financial advice for someone in this position is predictable. Cut expenses, save more, invest wisely. All of that is true, but the people who make the most dramatic recoveries are the ones who are willing to challenge every assumption about how their life needs to look for the next 3 to 5 years. I once observed a couple in their early 60s, both working, with modest savings and a large home they could no longer afford to maintain in the context of their broader financial goals. The conventional advice would have been to stay put, manage the costs, hope for appreciation. Instead, they made a decision that looked radical on the surface, but was, in reality, an act of extraordinary financial intelligence. They sold that large home and moved in with their adult daughter, who was working and caring for a young child while trying to finish her education. The arrangement was structured. They contributed to household expenses and provided daily support for their grandchild, which eliminated their daughter's childcare costs. In exchange, their personal expenses dropped by nearly 70%. Over a 3-year period, they saved an amount that would have taken them more than a decade to accumulate under their previous arrangement. At the end of that period, they purchased a modest, low-maintenance property outright, with no mortgage. The daughter graduated, the grandchild was cared for, and 2 people who had arrived at 61 with almost nothing saved had, by 64, established genuine financial stability. The principle underneath that story is this: your living expenses are not fixed. They feel fixed because they have been the same for years, but they are choices, and some of those choices, reconsidered deliberately and creatively, can produce results that no investment return can match in the short term. Before you look for the next financial product, look at the structure of your expenses. That is where the largest, fastest gains are usually hiding. One of the most undervalued decisions you can make at this stage is to work longer. The cultural assumption that retirement must begin at 65 is an artifact of policy decisions made in a very different era, designed for people with very different life expectancies. The actuarial reality today is that if you are 60 and in reasonably good health, the statistical probability that you or your partner will live into your late 80s or early 90s is very high. Planning for a 30-year retirement is not pessimism, it is realism. And that 30-year window looks very different depending on whether your financial foundation is built at 65 or at 70. Every additional year of earned income is a year your existing savings do not need to be drawn down. It is a year of additional contributions to retirement accounts. And it is a year of continued tax contributions that support your eligibility for larger future benefits. Working longer is not a consolation prize for failing to plan. For many people in our position, it is the single highest return decision available. On the subject of Social Security, I want to spend some time because the decisions people make here have consequences that stretch across decades, and most people make them without fully understanding what is at stake. The baseline instinct, when someone reaches their early 60s and qualifies to begin receiving benefits, is to start immediately. The logic feels sound. Take the money now, use it now, stop worrying. But that instinct is often expensive in the long run. The Social Security system uses your highest 35 earning years to calculate your base benefit. Every additional year that you work and earn at or near your peak income can strengthen that calculation significantly. Beyond that, for every year you delay claiming benefits past your full retirement age, up to age 70, you receive delayed retirement credits that increase your monthly benefit by approximately 8% per year. Over a retirement lasting into the mid-80s or beyond, the cumulative difference between claiming at 62 and claiming at 70 can represent tens of thousands, sometimes more than $100,000 in total lifetime benefits. The decision should never be made by default. It should be made with full understanding of what you are giving up or gaining. There is another dimension of retirement preparation that the financial world tends to understate because it does not produce a product to sell: physical and mental health. Your ability to execute any financial strategy depends entirely on your capacity to function, to work, to think clearly, and to remain engaged with your own future. Chronic disease is not only a physical burden, it is a financial one. Medical costs are among the leading reasons that retirement savings are depleted prematurely. The cost of treating conditions that are largely preventable through consistent exercise, appropriate nutrition, and stress management is one of the most destructive forces working against financial security in later life. The person who arrives at 70 in good health, with the energy and clarity to continue working part-time, to manage investments actively, and to make good decisions under pressure, is in an entirely different financial position than the person who arrives exhausted and managing multiple chronic conditions. Health is not separate from wealth in the second half of life. It is the foundation of it. There is a quality of mind that every person who has made a meaningful financial recovery at this stage shares. It is the refusal to accept that the future is already determined. The story that keeps people frozen always involves fixed circumstances, a fixed income, fixed expenses, fixed limitations. That story is almost never entirely true. What holds people in it is not external reality. It is the internal decision to stop looking for a different path. I have seen people in genuinely difficult circumstances, late to the realization, with genuinely limited resources, make choices that created meaningful change, not miracles, real, practical, incremental progress that compounded over 5 and 10 years into something that gave them security and peace of mind. The common denominator was always the same. They refused to accept that the current picture was the permanent one. On the subject of continued education and financial literacy, the financial landscape changes continuously. tax laws shift, account structures evolve, new strategies emerge, and old ones become obsolete. There are specific areas of knowledge that become critical at this stage. Understanding how catch-up contributions available to those over 50 can accelerate growth in a compressed time frame. Understanding the difference between traditional pre-tax accounts and Roth accounts, and which is more advantageous given your current and anticipated tax situation. Understanding how investment allocations should shift as the timeline to retirement shortens, balancing growth with preservation. These are not exotic topics. They are the basic mechanics of the system you are participating in. Understanding them is not optional if you want to optimize your outcome. There is one more strategy I want to address because it is consistently misunderstood and vastly underutilized. If you own a home, are at least 62 years old, and have approximately 50% or more equity in that property, you may have access to a financial instrument that could fundamentally change the arithmetic of your retirement. A home equity conversion mortgage, a federally insured form of reverse mortgage, has evolved considerably from the version most people vaguely recall from decades past. At its most basic, it allows qualified homeowners to access the equity in their home without selling the property and without taking on a traditional monthly mortgage payment. That single feature can produce an immediate and significant reduction in fixed monthly expenses. For someone who arrived at 62 with limited liquid savings but meaningful home equity, this instrument can generate a tax-free income stream that supplements retirement income and extends the runway considerably. The details matter enormously, and understanding them fully before acting is essential. But dismissing this strategy without serious examination is a mistake. The equity you have built over decades is a resource. Whether it serves you in retirement or simply transfers to someone else when the property changes hands, is a decision that deserves careful, deliberate thought. Now, I want to be completely direct with you before we finish. Everything I have covered today gives you a framework, but a framework without execution is just information, and information without action changes nothing. You have been gathering knowledge, and that matters. But the people who actually transform their financial situation in the next 5 to 10 years are the ones who move from knowing to doing, starting today, not next week, not after the new year. The most important thing you can do in this exact moment is to go to the first link in the description below this video. What you will find there is not a sales pitch, and it is not a collection of generic advice you have already heard. It is a complete, structured roadmap built specifically for people who are over 60 and who have decided that the current situation is not where the story ends. It covers the exact mechanisms, the specific strategies, and the real decisions that separate the people who arrive at 75 with genuine security from the people who arrive with regret. The men and women who have gone through it describe it as the conversation they wish they had had 20 years ago. You cannot recover 20 years, but you can act today. And today, right now, is the only thing that actually matters. Time is not waiting, and neither should you. The link is in the description. Use it.